The story begins on a dark and stormy night inside a luxurious apartment where one of Spain's most successful businessmen, Adrián Doria, is trapped under police surveillance. Just days earlier, Adrián was celebrating the biggest achievement of his career after winning the Businessman of the Year award, and his company was preparing to expand into the Asian market. But now, everything he worked so hard to build is on the verge of falling apart. He has been accused of brutally murdering his secret lover, Laura Vidal, and every news station has already painted him as a cold-blooded killer. As Adrián anxiously waits inside his apartment, the doorbell suddenly rings. Standing outside is an elderly woman with a calm but intimidating presence. She introduces herself as Virginia Goodman, the country's most respected witness consultant and one of the best legal strategists around. Throughout her career, Virginia has never lost a case, and this will be her final assignment before retirement. Virginia wastes no time getting to the point. She tells Adrián that the prosecution has just found a surprise witness who could completely destroy his defense during the trial. They have only 3 hours to prepare before it's too late. She makes one thing perfectly clear. If she is going to save him, he must tell her the absolute truth. No lies, no half-truths, and no hidden details. Looking him straight in the eyes, she says, "There is no salvation without suffering. If you lie to me, I can't help you." Feeling cornered, Adrián finally agrees to tell the story from the very beginning. A few months earlier, Adrián had been living a double life. Although he loved his wife, Sonia, he had secretly fallen into an affair with a beautiful photographer named Laura Vidal, who was also married. Their relationship had been hidden from everyone, but eventually they realized they couldn't continue living that way forever. They decided to take one last trip together before ending the affair and returning to their families for good. After spending the weekend together, they began driving back through a quiet mountain road. As they talked about moving on with their lives, a deer suddenly jumped onto the road. Adrián instinctively swerved to avoid it, causing the car to spin out of control. Before he could regain control, another vehicle crashed directly into them. The accident left Adrián and Laura shaken but alive, with only minor injuries. However, when Adrián rushed to check the other driver, he discovered a young man slumped over the steering wheel. Blood was running down his forehead, and he wasn't moving. Adrián checked for signs of life, but believed the young man was dead. Panicking, Adrián immediately reached for his phone to call the police, but Laura stopped him. She reminded him that if the authorities arrived, everyone would discover they had been together. Their affair would become public, destroying both of their marriages, Adrián's reputation, and everything they had built over the years. Laura convinced him that there were no witnesses on the deserted road. As terrible as it sounded, she believed they still had a chance to escape without anyone knowing the truth. Torn between doing the right thing and protecting his own future, Adrián made the worst decision of his life. He agreed to cover up the accident. Just then, another vehicle appeared in the distance. Thinking quickly, they pushed the young man's body back into his own car and pretended they had only experienced a minor accident. A passing driver stopped to offer help, but Laura calmly explained that they had simply bumped into each other and were exchanging insurance information. Believing her story, the man wished them luck and drove away. Once the road was clear again, they faced another problem. Adrián's BMW had been badly damaged and refused to start. Laura came up with a desperate plan. She told Adrián to drive the young man's car somewhere no one would ever find it, while she stayed behind and waited for a tow truck. Although terrified, Adrián did exactly as she suggested. He climbed into the stranger's car, with the young man's body still inside, and drove away from the accident scene. Every mile made him feel more anxious, as guilt slowly began to consume him. Eventually, he reached a remote swamp surrounded by thick trees. Believing nobody would ever search there, he pushed the vehicle into the water and watched as it slowly disappeared beneath the surface. Convinced that all the evidence had vanished forever, Adrián left the swamp and returned to Laura. Meanwhile, Laura had been waiting alone beside the road when an older man driving a tow truck stopped to help her. His name was Tomás Garrido, a retired mechanic. Seeing that she had nowhere else to go, Tomás kindly offered to tow her damaged car to his nearby home and repair it himself. With no better option available, Laura reluctantly accepted. When they arrived, Tomas's wife warmly welcomed Laura into their house, while her husband began fixing the car outside. Everything seemed normal until the couple casually mentioned that they had a son named Daniel. The moment Laura heard that name, her heart nearly stopped. As she looked around the living room, she noticed several family photographs sitting on a shelf. The smiling young man in those pictures was the very same driver whose car she and Adrián had crashed into earlier that day. Laura suddenly realized something horrifying. She wasn't sitting in a stranger's home. She was sitting in the house of the parents of the young man they had just left for dead. Laura struggled to hide her panic as she sat in the Garridos' living room. She forced a smile, pretending everything was fine, but inside she was terrified. Every family photo on the wall reminded her of the terrible secret she and Adrián were hiding. Then things became even worse. While searching through Daniel's pockets after the accident, Laura had unknowingly taken his mobile phone. Just as she was sitting with Daniel's parents, the phone suddenly began to ring from inside her handbag. Tomás and his wife immediately recognized the ringtone. Confused, they looked at Laura and asked why she had their son's phone. Thinking quickly, Laura claimed it was her own phone and managed to silence it before they became too suspicious. She discreetly hid the device beneath a sofa cushion and tried to remain calm. Fortunately, Tomás had already finished repairing her car. Laura thanked the couple for their kindness, got into her vehicle, and drove away as fast as she could. A short distance down the road, she met Adrián and picked him up. Together, they returned to the city, determined to leave the nightmare behind. To avoid raising suspicion, they reported Adrián's damaged BMW as stolen and later lied to the police, claiming they had spent the entire weekend in Paris. Back in the present, Virginia listens carefully without interrupting. She points out that the police eventually began investigating Daniel's disappearance, but because there was no body, detectives believed he had stolen money from the bank where he worked and fled the country. Virginia explains that this wasn't a coincidence. Laura had secretly hacked into Daniel's accounts and planted fake evidence to make it appear that he had run away with stolen money. It was a clever plan that successfully misled the investigation and shifted attention away from the accident. But their nightmare was far from over. A few days later, Adrián received an anonymous letter. Someone knew exactly what had happened. The letter demanded 100,000 euros and instructed Adrián and Laura to deliver the money to room 715 of the Bella Vista Hotel. If they refused, the truth would be handed over to the police. Terrified, the pair gathered the money and drove to the isolated hotel. When they entered the room, it was completely empty. At first, Adrián believed they had arrived too early, but within seconds, he sensed that something wasn't right. He suggested they leave immediately. Before they could reach the door, someone struck Adrián from behind with tremendous force. Everything went black. When Adrián finally regained consciousness, police officers were breaking down the hotel room door. Laura was lying lifeless on the floor. The ransom money was scattered across the room. Adrián had blood on his clothes, and he was the only person still inside. Even more mysterious, the room had been locked from the inside with the security chain fastened, and every window was sealed shut. There was no sign that anyone else had entered or escaped. To the police, the conclusion seemed obvious. Adrián had murdered Laura. However, Adrián insists that someone else attacked him, killed Laura, and somehow escaped before the police arrived. He swears he is innocent of her murder. Virginia isn't convinced. She calmly asks him a simple question. If there was another person in that room, how did they disappear from a locked room without leaving a single trace? After thinking for a moment, Virginia presents her own theory. She believes the mysterious attacker could have been Tomás Garrido. According to her, Tomás eventually discovered that Adrián and Laura were responsible for Daniel's disappearance. Seeking revenge, he lured them to the hotel with the blackmail letter, murdered Laura, framed Adrián, and escaped with help from his wife, who happened to work at the hotel. Adrián immediately embraces the theory because it proves he didn't kill Laura. But Virginia quickly reminds him that such a theory means nothing without evidence. To prove Tomás had a motive, the police would first need to discover Daniel's body. Only then could they connect the accident to Laura and Adrián. Virginia leans forward and quietly asks the one question Adrián has been avoiding all night. Where did you hide the body? She promises that if he tells her the location, she can anonymously tip off the police and build a defense that places most of the blame on Laura, who is already dead. At first, Adrián refuses. He doesn't trust anyone with that secret. Virginia continues applying pressure. She even shows him a photograph of the prosecution's surprise witness, convincing him that his only chance of survival is complete honesty. Finally, Adrián gives in. He takes a map and marks the exact location of the swamp where he sank Daniel's car. Virginia stares at him in silence before asking one final question. Are you absolutely certain Daniel was already dead when you pushed the car into the water? The room becomes painfully quiet. Adrián lowers his head. For the first time, the confident businessman completely breaks down. With tears in his eyes, he confesses the darkest secret he has carried ever since that night. Daniel wasn't dead. As the car slowly sank into the swamp, Daniel regained consciousness. He opened his eyes. He desperately banged on the window, begging for help. Adrián saw everything. He could have saved him, but instead of pulling him out, he stood on the shore and watched as the car disappeared beneath the water. He chose his career, his reputation, and his freedom over an innocent man's life. Virginia's expression instantly changes. The sympathy she showed throughout the meeting disappears, replaced by anger and disgust. She no longer sees Adrián as a frightened businessman. She sees him for what he truly is: a murderer. Adrián desperately tries to justify his actions, claiming he panicked and had no other choice, but Virginia refuses to accept his excuses. Moments later, she says she needs a short break and walks toward the window. As Adrián watches her, something suddenly feels strange. She quietly says, "Your time is up." Confused, Adrián looks at the clock and insists they still have time before the trial. Virginia calmly smiles. Then she reveals that she has recorded every word of his confession. Adrián's eyes immediately fall on the pen resting on the table. A tiny red light is blinking inside it. It isn't an ordinary pen. It's a hidden recorder. Looking through the apartment window, Adrián notices a man standing in the building across the street. It's Tomás Garrido. He's staring directly back at him. Adrián turns toward Virginia in complete confusion. Then the film delivers its biggest twist. The woman sitting in front of him isn't Virginia Goodman at all. She's actually Elvira Garrido, Daniel's mother. Using professional makeup, prosthetics, and careful preparation, she disguised herself as the famous lawyer to trick Adrián into confessing everything. When the justice system failed her family, she created her own plan to uncover the truth. As Adrián sits frozen in shock, Elvira removes part of her disguise, picks up the recording, and quietly walks out of the apartment. Seconds later, the doorbell rings once again. Adrián opens the door, and this time, the real Virginia Goodman is standing outside. Only then does he realize he has been outsmarted from the very beginning. Daniel's parents didn't need revenge through violence. They simply needed the truth, and Adrián had willingly handed it to them with his own words. The invisible guest reminds us that no matter how carefully a crime is covered up, the truth has a way of resurfacing. Lies may buy time, but guilt never truly disappears, and sooner or later, every secret demands to be heard. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more mind-bending thrillers in our next recap.